You've lived a life dominated by doubt and fear. How do you step into bravery? Step. That's how you step into bravery. Step. Take the step. Step aggressively towards your fear. And that step towards your fear is the step into bravery. Because we're scared of what we don't know. And there is only one way to learn and to know, and that is to confront that fear. You have to step, you have to go. And this simple action, this simple attitude, it answers so many questions. My theory here would be, if you're afraid of fighting and altercations, go train jiu-jitsu. If you're afraid of heights, work on some rock climbing. If you're afraid of the water, it's time to swim. It's time to surf. It's time to get out there. If you're afraid of pull-ups, if you're afraid of pull-ups, do pull-ups. If you're in squats, do squats. If you're afraid of public speaking, go speak in public. Mm-hmm. If you're afraid to start a business, start a business. Make it small. And on all these, what you have to do is you have to mitigate the risk and you have to ease yourself into it, but you got to go for it. And eventually you will overcome that fear. Mm-hmm. But the hard part is you got to take that first step. Yeah. You got to take that first step to begin to inoculate yourself against the fear of the thing that's in your mind. Because that fear generally is in your mind. Yeah. You know, when you get up on stage to do a public speaking, people are not going to throw tomatoes at you and say, "Oh my, you're an idiot, get off the stage." No, right. They're going to sit there, you know? So there's nothing to fear. Yeah. It's in your head.
Another key in building this winning edge is, folks, you got to stand for something. People in America, the good people in America, are fed up with these dadgum fence sitters and mealy mouths. Corporate America has an especially black eye in business today. Most people in America think you can't find a company. They think you can't find a salesperson that'll tell you like it is and stand behind their word. They think these companies will sell anything, say anything, just to make a sale, just to make a profit. Well, you know what, folks, if you want to win in the free enterprise system in America today, you got to stand for something.
Make a damn schedule and stick to it. Okay, so what's the rule with the schedule? It's not a bloody prison. That's the first thing that people do wrong. They say, well, I don't like to follow a schedule. Well, it's like, well, what kind of schedule are you setting up? Well, I have to do this, then I have to do this, then I have to do this, you know, and then I just go play video games, because who wants to do all these things that I have to do? It's like, wrong. Set the damn schedule up so that you have the day you want. That's the trick. It's like, okay, I've got tomorrow. If I was going to set it up so it was the best possible day I could have, practically speaking, what would it look like? Well, then you schedule that. And obviously there's a bit of responsibility that's going to go along with that, because if you have any sense, one of the things that you're going to insist upon is that at the end of the day, you're not in worse shape than you were than at the beginning of the day, right? Because that's a stupid day. If you have a bunch of those in a row, you just dig yourself a hole and then you bury yourself in it. It's like, sorry, that's just not a good strategy. It's a bad strategy. So maybe 20% of your day has to be responsibility and obligation, or maybe it's more than that, depending on how far behind you are. But even that, you can ask yourself, okay, well, I've got these responsibilities. I have to schedule the damn things in. What's the right ratio of responsibility to reward? And you can ask yourself that, just like you'd negotiate with someone who is working for you. It's like, okay, you got to work tomorrow. Okay, so I want you to work tomorrow. And you might say, okay, well, what are you going to do for me that makes it likely that I'll work for you? Well, you could ask yourself that, you know. So maybe you do an hour of responsibility and then you play a video game for 15 minutes. I don't know, whatever turns your crank, man. But, you know, you have to negotiate with yourself and not tyrannize yourself. Like you're negotiating with someone that you care for, that you would like to be productive and have a good life. And that's how you make the schedule. It's like, and then you look at the day and you think, well, if I had that day, that'd be good. Great. You know, and you're useless and horrible, so you'll probably only hit it with about 70% accuracy, but that beats the hell out of 0, right? And if you hit it even with 50% accuracy, another rule is, well, aim for 51% the next week, or 50.5% for God's sake, or because you're going to hit that position where things start to loop back positively and spiral you upward.
People don't know what success is all about. And since they don't know what it's about, they really don't know where to look for it. Success is really nothing more than the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. This means that any person who knows what he's doing and where he's going is a success. Any person with a goal toward which he's working is a successful person. This means that the boy in high school who's working toward a diploma, or the boy in college toward a degree, is just as successful as any human being on earth, because he knows what he's doing, why he's getting up in the morning, and where he's going. But conversely, if a person doesn't know what he's working toward, what it is he wants, doesn't have a goal toward which he's working, then he must, at least by this definition, be called unsuccessful. Why isn't then, with this simple definition, why isn't everyone successful? Should be easy. Yet surveys indicate that 19 out of 20, 95% at least, are not. In fact, a survey one time asked thousands of working men why they got up in the morning and went to work, and 19 out of 20 didn't know. 19 out of 20 working people didn't have the foggiest notion of why they got up in the morning and went to work. Under closer questioning, they said, well, everybody works. Well, that would be a good reason to quit. In fact, here's a little rule of thumb you might want to remember. Whatever the great majority is doing under any given circumstance, if you do exactly the opposite, you'll probably never make another mistake as long as you live. Just something to keep in the back of your mind. The problem with most people is that they're playing the world's most unrewarding game, and the name of the game is follow the follower. There's a story about a small town in which there was a jewelry store, and like all jewelry stores, or most jewelry stores at least, he had a big clock in his window. And every morning for years, he'd noticed a working man stop, adjust his pocket watch to the same time as the clock in the window. He'd been doing this for many years, and one morning the jeweler was out in front sweeping a sidewalk, and so he asked the man, he said, tell me, why do you adjust your watch to my big clock every morning? I've noticed you doing that for years. The man said, well, I'm the foreman down at the big plant. He said, I want to make sure my watch is correct because I blow the quitting whistle every night at 5 o'clock. And the jeweler looked at him rather strangely for a minute, and he said, well, that's funny. He said, I've been setting that big clock in the window by that quitting whistle all these years. A very logical thing, but they could have been off 6 months. It was a case of a person just going along with what he thought to be correct without checking his references. So I want to suggest that from now on out, at least we do that we check our references and ask ourselves, are the people I'm following going where I want to go?
Next thing is that you've got to activate the thinker in you. Don't allow your emotions to control you. We are emotional, but you want to begin to discipline your emotion. If you don't discipline and contain your emotions, they will use you. Your mind goes on automatic, just like a garden. You know, I loved reading the book called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. He uses the analogy of the mind being like a garden. You know, weeds don't have to have any encouragement to grow. You don't have to water them. They don't have to get sunshine. They don't have to have fertile ground. They will grow through the cracks of a sidewalk. Am I right? But if you want to grow orchids or roses or any kind of exotic flowers, there are special processes and procedures you must go through. Well, by the same token, you don't have to force yourself or motivate yourself to think negatively, to be depressed, to hate somebody, to want revenge, to want to get back at somebody, to beat yourself up over the head, to feel loaded with guilt. You don't have to make any effort to do that. Your mind is on automatic. It will do that by itself. But if you want to begin to move into your own personal greatness, if you want to begin to really enjoy a happy, successful, healthy life, you've got to be willing to go against the tide. You've got to be willing to harness your will and say, in spite of this, I'm in control here. I'm not going to let this get me down. I'm not going to let this destroy me. I'm coming back. And I'll be stronger and better because of it. You have got to make a declaration that this is what you stand for. You're standing up for your dreams. You're standing up for peace of mind. You're standing up for health. You want it, and you're going to go all out to have it. It's not going to be easy. When you want to change, it's not easy. If it were in fact easy, everybody would do it. But if you're serious, you'll go all out.
Attitude has been called the most important word in any language in the world, because it's our attitude toward our world, toward all the people in it, that will determine the world's attitude and all the people's attitude toward us. It's a simple thing. Most of us know it, but we tend to forget it. People will react to us according to our attitude. And our attitude is the greatest gift we can be given. You know, the little creatures of the world were given a wonderful gift by Mother Nature called protective coloring, in which they can blend into their background without being seen. But man was not given this great gift, because man was given an incalculably greater one. Only man has the godlike power to make his surroundings change to fit him, because his environment will change as he changes. A man's environment is a merciless mirror of him as a human being. And if he thinks his environment can stand a little improvement, all he has to do is improve, and his environment will improve to reflect the changing man.
Set up some aims for yourself, goals that you actually value. And the Future Authoring Program helps people do that. And basically, it does a situational analysis it helps you do a situational analysis of your life more than a psychological analysis, I would say. And so the questions are something like, well, all right, you're going to have to put some effort into your life, and you need to be motivated to do that. And so what are the potential sources of motivation? Well, you could think about them in the big five manner. You know, if you're extroverted, you want friends. If you're agreeable, you want an intimate relationship. If you're disagreeable, you want to win competitions. If you're open, you want to engage in creative activity. If you're high neuroticism, you want security. Okay, so those are all sources of potential motivation that you could draw on, that you could tailor to your own, your own personality. But then there are dimensions that you want to consider your life across. And so we ask people about, well, if you could have your life the way you wanted it in 3 to 5 years, if you were taking care of yourself properly, what would you want from your friendships? What would you want from your intimate relationship? How would you like to structure your family? What do you want for your career? Well, how are you going to use your time outside of your job? And how are you going to regulate your mental and physical health, and maybe also your drug and alcohol use? Because that's a good place to auger down, because alcoholism, for example, wipes out, 5 to 10% of people. So you want to keep that under control. And then so maybe you develop a vision of what you would like your life to be, and that associates the goal. Well, once the goal is established, and then you break down the goal into micro processes that you can implement, the micro processes become rewarding in proportion, in relation to their causal association with the goal, and that tangles in your incentive reward system. We talked about the dopaminergic incentive reward system, and that's the thing that keeps you moving forward. And the way it works is that it works better if it produces positive emotion when it can see you moving towards a valued goal. Okay, well, what's the implication of that? Better have a valued goal, because otherwise you can't get any positive motivation working out. And so the more valuable the goal, in principle, the more the micro processes associated with that goal start to take on a positive charge. And so what that means is, well, you get up in the morning and you're excited about the day, you're ready to go. And so as far as I can tell, what you do is you specify your long-term ideal. Maybe you also specify a place you want to stay the hell away from, so that you're terrified to fail as well as excited about succeeding, because that's also useful. You specify your goal. You do that in some sense as a unique individual. You want to specify goals that make you say, oh, if that could happen as a consequence of my efforts, it would clearly be worthwhile. Because the question always is, why do something? Because doing nothing is easy. You just sit there and you don't do anything. That's real easy. The question is, why would you ever do anything? And the answer to that has to be because you've determined by some means that it's worthwhile. And then the next question might be, well, where should you look for worthwhile things? And one would be, well, you could consult your own temperament. And the other would be, well, you kind of look at what it is that people accrue that's valuable across the lifespan. So you do a structural analysis of the subcomponents of human existence, and I already did that. You need a family, you need friends. Like, you don't need to have all these things, but you better have most of them. Family, friends, career, educational goals, plans for, you know, time outside of work, attention to your mental and physical health, etc. You know, that's what life is about. And if you don't have any of those things, well, then all you've got left is misery and suffering. So that's a bad deal for you. So once you set up that goal structure, let's say, and that's really in many ways that's what you should be doing at university. That's exactly what you should be doing, is trying to figure out who it is that you're trying to be, right? And you aim at that, and then you use everything you learned as a means of building that person that you want to be. And I really mean want to be. I don't mean should be, even those things are going to overlap. And it's important to distinguish between those, because that's partly, and this is back down to the micro routine analysis. So if I was saying, well, you're going to try to make yourself more industrious. Okay, number one, specify your damn goals, because how are you going to hit something if you don't know what it is? That isn't going to happen. And often people won't specify their goals too, because they don't like to specify conditions for failure. So if you keep yourself all vague and foggy, which is real easy, because that's just a matter of not doing as well, then you don't know when you fail. And people might say, well, I really don't want to know when I fail because that's painful. So I'll keep myself blind about when I fail. That's fine, except you'll fail all the time then. You just won't know it until you've failed so badly that you're done. And that can easily happen by the time you're 40. So I would recommend that you don't let that happen. So that's willful blindness, right? You could have known, but you chose not to. Okay, so once you get your goal structure set up, you think, okay, if I could have this life, it looks like that might be worth living, despite the fact that it's going to be, you know, anxiety provoking and threatening, and there's going to be some suffering and loss involved and all of that. Obviously, the goal is to have a vision for your life such that, all things considered, that justifies your effort.
So what are the trade-offs that you would consider, like, you know, we work our asses off, we do a lot of stuff, but this is what we had to sacrifice in order to do it? If you think of it that way.
I think if you think of it as a sacrifice, then you're going to build frustration or resentment. I really don't. If you think it's a sacrifice, you shouldn't do it. I think the challenge is that most people have this illusion about life-work balance. And I think that's, you know, if you're going to accomplish anything, it's what people are laughing because, you know, it's bullshit, right? What's true is life-work integration. So I was just in 7 countries, 21 days, but who's with me is my family, who's with me is my friends, and I've done well enough to have a plane and bedrooms and all that kind of cool stuff makes it. But when I didn't, we huffed it together, and beginning days it was coach and dragging ourselves around. But I thought it was great for my kids to have schooling, but I thought an education was more valuable, and traveling the earth was a part of that. But you know, we're in the middle of this crazy schedule, but it's not work, it's a mission. When it's work, it's that. I always ask people, I said, how would you describe what you do? And people, I say, is it work, is it career, or is it mission? And most people, of course, say it's work, and that's exactly what it is. It's heavy. If it's, you know, if it's your career, it gives you something more. If it's your mission, it doesn't wear you out, it brings energy to you, it's fulfilling. And if you can tie your mission in with the people that you love, it's pretty cool. You know, there's some people in this room that are my friends. I see Dean here in the front row here, and it's like we're all on this mission, and we find time to connect and be with each other and have a blast with each other, but we're sharing about things that matter. I'm not a person to go to a party and, like, you know, go in the corner and chit chat. It's like, you want to talk about something deep? Let's rock. You don't? let me go home and be with my family. You know, let me go do something fun, some of that nature. If you can combine your mission with your family, combine your mission with some of your friends, then you're going to accomplish 1,000,000 times more. But if you think it's a sacrifice, don't do it, because then all you're doing is you're going to have resentment later on or frustration later on, and then you really aren't contributing, because you're trading off. You're not giving.
You are going to incur a lot of disappointment, a lot of failure, a lot of pain, a lot of setbacks, a lot of defeats. But in the process of doing that, you will discover some things about yourself that you don't know right now. What you will realize is that you have greatness within you. What you'll realize is that you're more powerful than you can ever begin to imagine. What you will realize is that you're greater than your circumstances, that you don't have to go through life being a victim. As Jack indicated, I was born in Miami, Florida, in an area called Liberty City, in an abandoned building on a hard linoleum floor with my twin brother. We were 6 weeks of age. We were adopted. When I was in 5th grade, I was identified as EMR, labeled, educable, mentally retarded. put back from the 5th grade into the 4th grade and stayed in that category until I got out of high school. I don't have any college training, but I met a high school teacher who one day changed my life. I was waiting on another student, and when he came in, he said to me, "Young man, go to the board and write what I'm about to tell you." And I said, I can't do that, sir. He said, "Why not?" I said, "I'm not one of your students." He said, "It doesn't matter, follow my directions now." I said, "I can't do that, sir." He said, "Why not?" I said, "Because I'm educable mentally retarded." And he came from behind his desk and he looked at me. He said, "Don't ever say that again. Someone's opinion of you does not have to become your reality."
You don't have to necessarily have done anything wrong for things to get completely out of control. It's a terrifying doctrine, but it's not a hopeless doctrine because it still says that there's a way forward, there's a pathway forward, and the pathway forward is to adopt a mode of being that has some nobility so that you can tolerate yourself and perhaps even have some respect for yourself as someone who's capable of standing up in the face of that terrible vulnerability and suffering, and that the pathway forward, as far as the existentialists are concerned, is by, well, certainly by the avoidance of deceit, particularly in language, but also by the adoption of responsibility for the conditions of existence and some attempt on your part to actually rectify them. And the thing that's so interesting about that is, well, two, as far as I'm concerned, and some of this is from clinical experience. You know, if you take people, and I've told you this, and you expose them voluntarily to things that they are avoiding and are afraid of, you know, that they know they need to overcome in order to meet their goals, their self-defined goals. If you can teach people to stand up in the face of the things they're afraid of, they get stronger. And you don't know what the upper limits to that are, because you might ask yourself, like, if for 10 years, if you didn't avoid doing what you knew you needed to do, by your own definitions, right, within the value structure that you've created to the degree that you've done that, what would you be like? Well, you know, there are remarkable people who come into the world from time to time, and there are people who do find out over decades-long periods what they could be like if they were who they were, if they spoke their being forward. And they get stronger and stronger and stronger, and we don't know the limits to that. We do not know the limits to that. And so you could say, well, in part, perhaps the reason that you're suffering unbearably can be left at your feet, because you're not everything you could be, and you know it. And of course, that's a terrible thing to admit, and it's a terrible thing to consider, but there's real promise in it, right? Because it means that perhaps there's another way that you could look at the world and another way that you could act in the world. So what it would reflect back to you would be much better than what it reflects back to you now. My experience is with people that we're probably running at about 51% of our capacity. I mean, you can think about this yourselves. I often ask undergraduates how many hours a day you waste or how many hours a week you waste. And the classic answer is something like 4 to 6 hours a day. You know, inefficient studying, watching things on YouTube that not only do you not want to watch, that you don't even care about, that make you feel horrible about watching after you're done. That's probably 4 hours right there. You know, you think, well, that's 25 hours a week, it's 100 hours a month, that's 2.5 full work weeks, it's half a year of work weeks per year. And if your time is worth $20 an hour, which is a radical underestimate, it's probably more like 50 if you think about it in terms of deferred wages. If you're wasting 20 hours a week, you're wasting $50,000 a year. And you are doing that right now. And it's because you're young, wasting $50,000 a year is a way bigger catastrophe than it would be for me to waste it, because I'm not going to last nearly as long. And so if your life isn't everything it could be, you could ask yourself, well, what would happen if you just stopped wasting the opportunities that are in front of you? You'd be who knows how much more efficient, 10 times more efficient, 20 times more efficient. That's the Pareto distribution. You have no idea how efficient people get. It's off the charts. Well, and if we all got our act together collectively and stopped making things worse, because that's another thing people do all the time, not only do they not do what they should to make things better, they actively attempt to make things worse because they're spiteful or resentful or arrogant or deceitful or homicidal or genocidal or all of those things all bundled together in an absolutely pathological package. If people stopped really, really trying just to make things worse, we have no idea how much better they would get just because of that.
So there's this weird dynamic that's part of the existential system of ideas between human vulnerability, social judgment, both of which are major causes of suffering, and the failure of individuals to adopt the responsibility that they know they should adopt. It isn't merely that your fate depends on whether or not you get your act together and to what degree you decide that you're going to live out your own genuine being. It isn't only your fate, it's the fate of everyone that you're networked with. And so, you know, you think, well, there's 9 billion, 7 billion people in the world. We're going to peak at about 9 billion, by the way, and then it'll decline rapidly, but 7 billion people in the world, and who are you? You're just one little dust mote among that 7 billion, and so it really doesn't matter what you do or don't do, but that's simply not the case. It's the wrong model, because you're at the center of a network. You're a node in a network. Of course, that's even more true now that we have social media. You'll know 1,000 people, at least over the course of your life, and they'll know 1,000 people each, and that puts you one person away from 1,000,000, and two persons away from 1,000,000,000. And so that's how you're connected, and the things you do, they're like dropping a stone in a pond. The ripples move outward, and they affect things in ways that you can't fully comprehend, and it means that the things that you do and that you don't do are far more important than you think. And so if you act that way, of course, the terror of realizing that is that it actually starts to matter what you do, and you might say, well, that's better than living a meaningless existence. It's better for it to matter. But I mean, if you really asked yourself, would you be so sure if you had the choice? I can live with no responsibility whatsoever. The price I pay is that nothing matters. Or I can reverse it and everything matters. But I have to take the responsibility that's associated with that. It's not so obvious to me that people would take the meaningful path. You know, when you say, well, nihilists suffer dreadfully because there's no meaning in their life and they still suffer. Yeah, but the advantage is they have no responsibility. So that's the payoff, and I actually think that's the motivation. Say, well, I can't help being nihilistic. All my belief systems have collapsed. It's like, yeah, maybe. Maybe you've just allowed them to collapse because it's a hell of a lot easier than acting them out. And the price you pay is some meaningless suffering, but you can always whine about that and people will feel sorry for you, and you have the option of taking the pathway of the martyr, so that's a pretty good deal, all things considered, especially when the alternative is to bear your burden properly and to live forthrightly in the world. Well, what Solzhenitsyn figured out, and so many people in the 20th century, it's not just him, even though he's the best example, is that if you live a pathological life, you pathologize your society. And if enough people do that, then it's hell. Really. Really. And you can read the Gulag Archipelago if you have the fortitude to do that, and you'll see exactly what hell is like. And then you can decide if that's a place you'd like to visit, or even more importantly, if it's a place you'd like to visit and take all your family and friends. Because that's what happened in the 20th century.
What's going to fulfill you is different than the other person next to you. You're not going to learn that from anybody else. And you got to find it, because success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And I get those phone calls all the time for the multi-billionaire entrepreneur or politician or business person, or a person just won their Academy Award and they're depressed and they can't tell anybody because they got all their goals, but they're not fulfilled because they really don't have that sense of meaning in their life. They went for something and they got it, they achieved. And if you doubt this, what I'm saying is relevant to you or us or anyone, just think about a month ago, we lost what I consider to be a national treasure, Robin Williams. How many of you loved Robin Williams? Look around the room, keep your hands up, look. And most of you didn't know him. Almost every, and then where you go in the world, people love Robin Williams. By the way, was he great at achievement? Oh my God, that guy, he said he wanted to become a great comedian. He did that. I want to make the world laugh. He did. I want to make my own TV show. He did it. I want to have the #1 TV show. He did it. I want to make movies. He did it. I want an Academy Award for not being funny. Not his skill set, drama, and he did it. I want a beautiful family, and he did it. And then he hung himself. Make everybody happy but yourself. Not a good plan. So if I had a gift to give you, it would be maybe make a different decision. And the decision is that no matter what happens in your life, you're going to live in a beautiful state. A beautiful state. And that could be happy, that could be grateful, that could be being generous. Those are all beautiful states, aren't they? It could be curious, it could be fun, it could be playful. You're not limited to one state, but it's different than suffering. And most people suffering, and all suffering I've ever seen, I've traveled to 100 countries, I've dealt with presidents of countries and, presidents of businesses, CEOs, I've dealt with people in prison, I've dealt with, you name it, average people. Suffering always comes because you're obsessed about something related to you. You can only be depressed if you're focusing on yourself. You say, no, I'm depressed because it's my kids and they're not doing well. No, you're depressed because you feel you failed your kids. It's about you. It's about how you think what you should have done or shouldn't have done, or what someone did to you or didn't do to you in the past or the future, which don't even exist. So I have a simple goal. My goal is help people make a decision that says, I don't know what's going to happen. You might get a divorce, even though you don't think so. You might find a member of your family with cancer. You might have your house get burned down or have a tornado go by, and if you live in the same place, it happens every 2 years and you move back, we should talk, but some people seem to do that for some reason. You can't control those things. I can't control those things. I don't want those to happen to you or anybody I love or anybody who's even a stranger to me, but they're going to happen. True? Not positive thinking bullshit, just the truth. So if that's going to happen, I say make a decision now that says, I'm going to live in a beautiful state and I'm going to find beauty in whatever life brings me. Because life is too short not to.
And so you really have to believe the internet's going to be mainstream. A lot of people are going to get out there and use it, and that they're going to be willing to pay for some content.
Is that the operating idea that you have?
Well, each of these businesses is an entrepreneurial business. The overreaching theme is that, yes, I believe in the internet. I believe it'll get increasingly popular, and we're doing some neat new things to take advantage of that.
You've got a lot of cash on hand, yes?
Right.
All right. It puts you in an enviable position. You can experiment with a lot of entrepreneurial ideas and see what sticks and what flies.
Well, we're in business to make money,
but the other thing is providing such a cash flow for you.
Well, it all belongs to the shareholders.
Yeah.
We're not dilettantes.
No, I know.
We are business people, and it is true that if you find an idea that requires 3 or 4 years of improvement and patience and really sticking with it, that we're very good at that. Take Windows, which we bet our company on. Everybody doubted that would succeed. IBM did not support us in that. It took longer than we expected, over 4 years before finally graphical interface got popular, and now people take it for granted. It's part of every personal computer, and you just expect it to be there. That was one of the grand successes of the company. In the same way, we're betting on the internet, that our tools there will be popular, and that a few of these content plays that we've decided to get involved in, that the scale and the users will make those into great businesses.
When something is considered quote unquote impossible, how do you reframe it so it becomes possible in your mind, and how much of that is mindset?
Well, I think impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion. When someone tells me it's impossible, I always just look at them. Anybody around me knows that they can't do that. So that's part of it. But if they didn't know me, it's your opinion. And they'll say, no, science shows. And I say, yeah, and how many times has science showed something's impossible? Now science shows it's possible. Things are impossible until somebody does it. And so I find that, most of your business people, you look at businesses and what does it take to make a business grow? It's not impossible to make a business grow. A business has been shrinking for a long time, or it's been stuck. The real problem is always, the chokehold is always the psychology and the skills of the leader. Always. And 80% of that is psychology and 20% is the mechanics. Like if you don't know how to read your financials and you're trying to fly the plane of your company, I mean, come on. If all you do is go down and you look at profit and loss and you see what it is and you have a beer, either way, you either celebrate or you get depressed, something, you're going to be in trouble, right? But if you have the skill sets, that's one thing. But you can get any skill set if you have the psychology. And anytime a business is not growing, it is not because it's impossible. It's because they aren't innovating, and they're not innovating because they're believing it's impossible. I mean, if we all know what does it take to transform, I always tell people it takes 3 things to create a breakthrough in anything, in your personal life, in your business, anywhere. You need a strategy. But that's not the first place you should look, and it's the first place all of us look. Me too. It's our inherent thing. You want to lose weight? Well, how do I do it? I want to grow my business? How do I do it? It's instinctive. We've been trained to think that way. But the problem is the how-to is usually not that complex. I mean, come on. 70% of America is 75% of America now is overweight. Is that because it's so complex how to be fit and strong, right? You know, only the 1% know the answers. They hide it from you. You have to work your ass off to not hear what it takes, right? And so you know, I remember I went to a TED Med Center, and I watched about 12 doctors, one after another, get up and do these stories about how we could just get patients to take their medications and try to figure out the whole thing. And I was just looking and going, you're all talking about strategy and you've forgotten psychology. Because strategy is wonderful. I'm a strategist. I spent my whole life figuring out strategies. As we both know, a strategy could save you a decade, right? In business, strategy could save you, you know, it could make the difference between success and failure. But most people have strategies available, or they could get them, or you could create them. But the problem is you got a story. And your story is why it isn't working. And the story is, I've tried what? What? Everything. If you tried everything, you'd be fit, right? If you tried everything, you'd be profitable. If you tried everything, you'd be there. But people say it, you know, I'm big boned. That's what I used to say. I'm still big boned, but I'm 38 pounds lighter than I was 25 years ago, and I've never gained it back, right? When I was big boned, that was my story. All the good ones are gone. That's why I'm not in a relationship. Or they're gay and I'm not, or I'm gay and they are, or whatever the story is. There's always a story. And what I tell people is, you know, if you can just divorce the story of your limitation and marry the truth of your unlimited capacity, then the whole game changes.
Successful people are not people without problems. They're simply people who've learned to solve their problems. And there you have it. Living successfully, getting the things we want from life is a matter of solving the problems which stand between where we now are and the point we wish to reach. No one is without problems. They're a part of living. But let me show you how much time we waste in worrying about the wrong problems. Here's a reliable estimate of the things people worry about. Things that never happen, 40%. Things over and past that can't be changed by all the worry in the world, 30%. Needless worries about our health, 12%. Petty miscellaneous worries, 10%. Real, legitimate worries, 8%. In short, 92% of the average person's worries take up valuable time, cause painful stress, even mental anguish, and are absolutely unnecessary. And of the real, legitimate worries, there are two kinds. There are the problems we can solve, and there are the problems beyond our ability to personally solve. But most of our real problems usually fall into the first group, the ones we can solve if we learn how.
The first time I met Warren, we were talking about getting together and doing something again, and he pulled out his calendar, and the pages were so blank. And I said, wow, you know, you've managed to avoid getting tied into a lot of kind of meaningless activity. And you know, Warren said, yeah, you have to be good at saying no and picking the things that really make a difference. And that's one of many things I've learned from Warren, but that's one of my favorites. And so I can blame it on him whenever I'm turning things down. I was a born entrepreneur. I exited my mother's womb. When I was 8 years old, I was delivering papers door to door, knocking on doors, expanding the paper route. When I was 12 years old, I was shoveling driveways after snowstorms in New York. Yep. Make 20 bucks a driveway after a big snowstorm. I hit it big for the first time when I was 16, selling ices on the beach, blanket to blanket to blanket. Wow. And that's how it started. And after that, I was hiring people to come work. I had 12-year-old kids selling puka shell necklaces for me. My mother was buttering bagels in the morning, and that was really the way I always was you know, moving towards life. Looking
at 16.
Yeah, I was just, you know, always wanted to make money. The calendar gets very full with those, and then at night, after the kids have gone to bed, I'm on email a great deal. I get messages during the day. That's my chance to give long responses. And then over the weekend, I send a lot of mail as well. I take 2 weeks a year to just go off and read and think, where I'm not interrupted by work or anything else. I'm just solidly trying to think about the future, and people get to send me things to read as part of that so-called Think Week. So it's a nice mix of things. About 25% of the time then I'm out traveling around, meeting with customers, Europe, Asia, and that sort of helps me think, okay, do we have the right priorities? What are people responding well to, and what would they like to see us do better?
Depending on how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hard up, we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night, 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, like, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say, particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company.
I do a lot of training for many corporations, and I conduct sales seminars, and I've heard all kind of guys doing techniques and training people techniques of how to close sales and how to work with and begin to control the sale and how to ask for the close. Let me share something with you. You can learn all the techniques in the world. If you don't believe in yourself, it won't happen for you. I learned all of it. So that's why I do a training called Focus on the Seller. You've got to focus on you. And as you convince you, as you sell yourself every day, you will begin to see a difference in the things that you're doing. Selling yourself on your ability to perform a job, to achieve a certain objective. Telling yourself every day, here I go again. And I got what it takes. This is my day, and nothing out here is going to stop me.
The expectation from where I came from, and listen, I didn't come from like the slums in, Bangladesh or something, so I don't want to overemphasize it, but the expectation was I would be a cop. Mm-hmm. So I took the policeman's test when I was 17 or 18 years old with my little brother, Josh, and he wound up going into the police, and I wound up going to Fordham. Mm-hmm. But at the time, my dad had his restaurant repossessed by the federal agents for not paying his taxes. Mm-hmm. So they came with shotguns that summer in 1988, and they closed his place down. And that was the most traumatic moment of my life. And it probably is the second most traumatic moment of my life after 9/11. And when that happened, that changed everything about me as a person. Like, to see your dad have his restaurant taken, even like talking about it now as a 42-year-old. And I just thought to myself, wow, that he lost everything. And he never recovered from it. Mm-hmm. That was like the end of his entrepreneurial career. And I said to myself, I'm never gonna fail at business. Mm-hmm. No matter what it takes, I'll win. Because I'm never going to let the feds take my place. And he went $100,000 in debt, and tax evasion and all this stuff, and it was very scary. But I had no money to go to college, so I had to work 3 jobs and go to school at night at Fordham. And I learned a work ethic that I think made me who I am today. Like, I'm a very hard worker. I'm not the smartest kid in the class, but just in terms of being clever and having hustle, I think my career proves like I'll get it done no matter what.
I had this need of coming to America. I mean, when I started learning about America at the age of 10, and we got geography lessons and learned about America and saw the first photographs, I remember, in those photos in the textbook, but also in Super 8mm film footage that they showed in the classroom, about the Golden Gate Bridge and the Empire State Building and the 6-lane highways and all this. I said, what am I doing here in Austria? I mean, there's little roads. I want to go over there and I want to be part of the big deal. And so I had always this desire that felt like that the only way I ever would get to America, because in those days it wasn't common that you buy yourself a ticket, that no one could afford that. So I had to kind of accomplish something big that takes me to America. And then when I read about this guy, Reg Park, who won Mr. Universe 3 times and then became a star in Hercules movies, and then was in Italy filming, and then in Hollywood filming, I felt that could be the ticket. I should become Mr. Universe. I should become kind of a second Reg Park. Of course, no one really bought into that. My parents thought I was totally insane. And I remember that I hung up pictures above my bed, for inspiration, pictures of Reg Park in his posing trunks and all that. My mother was so concerned, she called the local doctor, and she had him analyze the wall because she thought that there's something terribly wrong, that I have naked men above my bed, and all of my buddies had women hanging above their bed, and so she was concerned about that. And but I think that my parents really thought that there was something terribly wrong of being that driven. Because I would come home at lunchtime, and then instead of having lunch, I would do 200 sit-ups. And at night I would go to the stadium and I would be lifting weights. I would come home at 10 o'clock at night and I would be continuing lifting weights. So it was like one of this insanity. In the military, I would continue lifting weights. No matter how the training was and how tough the basic training was, I would always then lift weights afterwards. And as a tank driver, I would have on the side of the tank in the toolbox, I would have my weights, my barbells and my dumbbells and my exercise bench and everything there in order to be, at any given time, if we stopped driving the tank and maneuvers at 2 in the morning, I would be able to pull out my weights and again lift for 2 hours my weights. So I was really a fanatic about the whole thing. But it's the only way you really get where the way I succeeded, because I became at the age of 20 the youngest Mr. Universe in London in the history of bodybuilding, because the youngest before then was Reg Park, the guy I was talking about, with the age of 24, but I became the youngest with 20, but it was because I was like so serious about the whole thing, and it worked. With the age of 21, after I won my second Mr. Universe title, I got an invitation from Joe Weider, who was the publisher of all the muscle magazines in America, and also the person that had the biggest warehouses of weight training equipment and had food supplement companies and all this. And he brought me to America, and so there I was. I mean, 6 years after my dream started, I was in America.
Adopt the mode of authentic being. And that is something like refusing to participate in the lie, in deception in the lie, to orient your speech as much as you can towards the truth, and to take responsibility for your own life and perhaps also for the lives of other people. And there's something about that that's meaningful and responsible and noble, but also serves to mitigate the very suffering that produces, say, the nihilism or the flee into the arms of or the escape into the arms of totalitarians to begin with. You need something to shelter you against your own vulnerability.
Take full responsibility for your life. Accept where you are and the responsibility that you're going to take yourself where you want to go. Someone said we have two primary choices in life. We can either accept conditions as they exist, or we can take the responsibility to change them. See, a lot of people want to exempt themselves from taking responsibility. All they want to do is talk about the problem. Every time you see them, they'll tell you their story over and over and over and over again. No, no. You want to take responsibility for your life. I got me here, I can get me out of this. And I'm getting out. I'm not going to be a volunteer victim. George Bernard Shaw said there are two kinds of people in life. You know, he said those that make things happen, those that watch things happen, and those that don't know what happened. And he said the people that get along in this life look around for the circumstances that they want, and if they can't find them, they make them. They create them. So part of beginning to get unstuck, you've got to decide that the behavior pattern that you have adopted doesn't work for you. You've got to change your strategies, and changing your strategy means reinventing your life. Recreating you, and you have the power to do that. You can decide that you're going to change, that you're not going to be a wimp. You can decide that you're going to stand up to life. You can decide that I'm going to live each day as if it were my last. You have the power to make that decision. You can decide I'm going to work on myself and develop myself. I'm going to empower me. And all of these things that are happening to me right now, they're just temporary inconveniences. They're not stronger than I am. I'm in charge here.
You can think about the world this way. You can think about it as your orderly little plan. That's a place, and you can think about it as the place that things that disrupt your plan comes from. That's another place. This is a bigger place than this, because there's an endless number of things that can disrupt your plan, and only a tiny number of them that can, that will help you work it out. So part of the question then too is like, are you the friend of your plan, or are you the friend of the thing that disrupts your plan? And I would say you should work to become the friend of the thing that disrupts your plan, because there's a lot of that. And then if you become the friend of the thing that disrupts your plan, then you start to develop strength in proportion to to the disruptive force, and that's really what you want. You want to be able to implement your plan, obviously, but you want to be able to take on the consequences of error and learn from it, and then you win constantly, because even if something goes sideways, you think there's something to be derived from this. That's wisdom, fundamentally.
You know, if you're going to be a great leader and you're going to lead your people to great success, you've got to have a coach's heart. And a coach is trained to look for the good things in people. You know, everybody, every piece of flesh that's ever been born, at one time in their life were dreamers. They felt good about themselves. But do you realize that 90% of the people that you recruit in business today, on the outside, they might look confident, you know, but inside, folks, they've been crushed. You know, they've lost their confidence. People have treated them bad. They've almost given up on themselves. And it's your ability as a coach to look inside those people and see something good and help them to believe in themselves again, to feel good about themselves again. That's going to determine, you know, how far you take your team.
You asked me if an ordinary person, by studying hard, would get to be able to imagine these things like I imagine. Of course, I was an ordinary person who studied hard. There's no miracle people. It just happens they got interested in this thing and they learned all this stuff. They're just people. There's no talent, a special miracle ability to understand quantum mechanics or a miracle ability to imagine electromagnetic fields that comes without practice and reading and learning and study. So if you say you take an ordinary person who's willing to devote a great deal of time and study and work and thinking and mathematics and time, then he's become a scientist.
Well, for me, I think it's very important to pursue your passions, and if you're doing that, the risks are often not as great as they seem to be. So for me, when I thought about leaving my job and starting this company, I knew there was a good chance that it wouldn't work, but I also knew that when I was 80 years old and thinking back over my life, I would never regret having tried and failed, but I might regret having never tried. And when I thought about it that way, it didn't actually seem like that big of a risk. I think it's the very rare idea that can be done by a single individual. Almost everything that is going to change the world, solve a problem, improve something, these are usually big efforts, and they require a team working together to really get something important done. And that has been the story of Amazon.com. At every step along the way, we've had a team here that is making this work. I mean, I don't know, even at the smallest scale, you have to figure out how to get help from your friends, from your family members, from people that you can hire in those early days. I think without that, it would never work.
Sometimes, I can't sleep at night because I'm thinking about something, and usually what I'll do is go write it down. I have some writing to do, so I get up and I go write down what I'm thinking, and that usually does the trick. But because I had been playing with YouTube, I thought, well, I'll try making YouTube video and telling people what I'm thinking about and see if that performs the same function as writing. And to me, the function of writing, well, it's twofold. One is conceivably to communicate with people, although the fundamental purpose for me is to clarify my thoughts so that I know, because if something is disturbing you, what that means is that it needs to be articulated. It's the emergence of unexplored territory, something that disturbs you. That's the right way to think about it. It's unmapped territory that's manifesting itself. It's like a vista of threat and possibility, and you need to articulate a path through it. And so that's what I was doing. It's like I was thinking, well, this is bothering me, and this seems to be why, and here's what I think is going on, and so I made the videos, and in some sense, I didn't think anything more of it.
30 to 60 hours a week. I had a small apartment which I shared with an old pal of mine. I had a small record collection, an ailing VW automobile, and a little tiny life with my minimum wage job, which I liked. And I looked at my life and realized this is probably about as good as it's going to get for me. I might quit this place and go work at my friend's record store because I liked being around records, and I could probably run his store very well, knowing what I knew about retail at that point. And then I got a very lucky break, because at that same time I was very frustrated. I said, well, this is going to be a very tough life. It's going to be a life of a lot of standing on my feet, a lot of work, taking it from other people, and having very little to show for it by Friday, Friday evening. And then Black Flag, the famous band, who was friends of mine, they played in New York. I was in Washington. I took a ride up to go see them because they weren't coming down to my town. I jumped on stage and sang with them that night a song because I had to go back down to DC and go work like some awful shift. They called me a few days later at the ice cream store and said, we're looking for a singer because the rhythm guitar player wants to, the vocalist wants to move down to rhythm guitar. You can tell I've told the story before. And we're holding auditions. You want to crack at this? Because we saw you on stage the other night, you're pretty wild. I looked at the ice cream scoop in my hand, my chocolate bespattered apron, and my future in the world of minimum wage work. Or I could go up to New York and audition for this crazy band who was my favorite. What's the worst that's gonna happen to me? I miss a day of work. Ooh, there goes 21 bucks. And I get humiliated in front of my favorite band. Yeah, humiliation and young people kind of go together. I was used to it. And so I took a train up there. I walked into this practice place in the East Village. I'm standing there with the band with a microphone in my hand. They said, pick the tune. And I sang every song they had, improvising most of it. 2 times through, we did the set. They said, okay, you have a seat. We're gonna go have a band meeting, whatever that means. And they came back like 10 minutes later, said, okay, you're in. I said, what do you mean? They said, you're the singer in Black Flag. I said, so what do I do? They go, you quit your job, you pack your gear, you meet us on the road. Here's the tour itinerary, here's the lyrics. We'll see you soon. So, fairly numb, I went back down to Washington with this passel of lyrics in my hand. Went to my boss and said, I'm not exactly quitting, but here's this thing that happened. And he said, it's your shot. I said, yeah. He said, take it.
I believe that passion is another word for energy. That's it.
What do you have energy for?
What energizes you? And that we naturally have a tremendous amount of body wisdom about that. And that every one of us has an internal fuel tank that is either empty or full. And if you're empty, you feel depleted. If you're full, you feel energized. And so if you simply are in any situation, I mean any situation, and you pay attention within 5 seconds to, does this person energize me? Do they deplete me? Where are they in the scale? You just gain some tremendous wisdom. And the simple way to start to figure out who you are and what you want is start aligning yourself with more things that energize you. So situationally, if you're lying in bed and the snooze alarm goes, or the alarm goes off, and you feel depleted, and you start reaching for the snooze button, that's a really big sign that you need to get out of bed. Now, being depleted versus energized has nothing to do with whether or not things are hard or easy. It has to do with what naturally actually either expands you or shrinks you. And so if you look at your client list and measure it depleted versus energized, what shrinks versus expands me, you have the actual map. And when you start to find the courage to make decisions that energize you and that expand you, whether they're scary as shit or not, that's when everything changes. And so that's how I actually make business decisions. I don't even, like, the money conversation comes second. It's, does this deplete or energize me? And if it depletes me, how do you move it in that direction? Or how do I say no? If it energizes me, how do I do more? Because if you are energized or expanded by something, you will do it for no money, you will do it happily, and you will suddenly wake up and say, oh my gosh, like I'm pursuing my passion. How did that happen?
In a world that's changing so quickly, the biggest risk you can take is not taking any risk. And I really think that that's true, right? I mean, a lot of people, I think that, you know, whenever it comes to, whenever you get yourself into a position where you have to make some big shift in direction or do something, you know, there are always people who are going to point to the downside risks of that decision. And locally, they're maybe right? I mean, for any given decision that you're going to make, there's upside and downside. But in aggregate, if you are stagnant and you don't make those changes, then I think you're guaranteed to fail, right? And not catch up. So to some degree, I think it's really right that over time, the biggest risk that you can take is to not take any risks.
Well, it's hard work. So it's easy to have ideas. It's very hard to turn an idea into a successful product. There are a lot of steps in between, and it takes persistence, relentlessness. So I always tell people who are, you know, who think they want to be entrepreneurs, you need a combination of stubborn relentlessness and flexibility. And you have to know when to be which. And basically, you need to be stubborn on your vision, because otherwise it'll be too easy to give up. But you need to be very flexible on the details, because as you go along pursuing your vision, you'll find that some of your preconceptions were wrong, and you're going to need to be able to change those things. So I think taking an idea successfully all the way to the market and turning it into a real product that people care about and that really improves people's lives is a lot of hard work.
There's a lot of forces in life that tend to funnel us down into this institutionalized path, and where people, you know, where people sometimes forget that that they're very unique, and that they have very unique feelings and perspectives. And again, it's, you know, the whole computer industry wants to forget about the humanist side, and just focus on the technology. And a lot of our industry focuses just on more is better, more megahertz and megabytes and, you know, speeds and feeds, we call it. But we think there's a whole other side to the coin, which is, what do you do with these things? Can we do more than just spreadsheets and word processors? Can we help you express yourself in richer ways, in your music, in your movies, in your photography, and these kinds of things that people want to do?
People have terrible risk calculus in general. Even people who try to be really good about this are bad at it. The answer, I think, is almost always A, you're wrong about what is risky and what is not risky, and B, most people don't take enough risk, especially early in your career. Being young and unknown and poor, that is actually a great gift in terms of the amount of risk you can take. And I think people don't capitalize on that enough. I think what risk actually looks like is not doing something that you will then spend the rest of your life regretting. And there's a quote, you know, people regret way more the things they didn't do than things that they did do. So if you really believe in something, if there's an idea that you're super passionate about, you know, and you take a calculated risk to start a company, realizing you may forgo a couple of years of steady income at another job, and whatever else, and, you know, maybe people call you a failure or whatever, that's a great risk to take. And if you don't take that risk, I think you have a very high chance that you end up regretting that. I think the wrong kind of risk to take is where people don't actually do things or don't commit to something because they don't want to fail, and they overrate the risk of failure and the reputation damage or embarrassment or whatever. I think one really important thing to strive for in your career is to be a doer, not a talker. And the reason that people don't do stuff, one is it's hard, and two is it's risky. And so you have these people that you know, want to dabble in a bunch of different projects but never be all in on one. And I think it's this combination of work and risk. And it's, you know, I think that's really bad. I think history belongs to the doers. And I think you should take a risk, actually do something. Don't just sit around and talk and organize and bring together groups and go to thought leadership conferences and whatever it is these people spend their time on other than actually building something. and just take the risk of committing to what you have conviction on.
I think that, as you know, right now the computer industry is in the tank. Personal computers, big computers, everything. And it's difficult. It's a difficult time. But I'm sure that Henry Ford had a few bad quarters back in the 1920s. And the automobile had a sort of historical imperative. It had, the minute it was invented, a sequence of events had to happen. The same is true with the personal computer. There is a tremendous momentum behind this. And I think that this year may be a delay. This year we may look back and say, well, 1985 was a slow year. But there is such momentum behind this that it will happen. It will permeate and change forever our educational processes. And my hope, again, is that not too many generations of students will pass through before this happens. It will happen within 20 years. It probably will happen within 10 years. But it could happen within 5 years. I am going back to the United States this weekend, and then about 2 weeks from today, I'll be in the Soviet Union for the first time in Moscow. Because one of my dreams has been to sell Macintoshes in the Soviet Union. And one of the highest agendas on my priority is to get them starting to think about exactly the same thing. So maybe 6 months or a year and a half from now, we can have some Soviet schools here at our Europe Consortium meeting.
I started to have these panic attacks, and I didn't know what was wrong. And I went to see one of the health people at campus, and they referred me to somebody, and the doctor said, "Oh, well, you just have anxiety, and you're having panic." And then he said, "I think you should go on Zoloft." And then I had anxiety about taking a drug because, it might change me. Yeah. Heaven forbid.
Right.
I'm so stable. Why would I want to be changed? And that's the funny thing is that those of us that struggle with these kinds of things, we're terrified of taking any kind of medication because we're afraid of not being ourselves. And yet, the anxiety or the depression or whatever you struggle with is actually keeping you from being yourself.
That's the anxiety, or that's the anchor.
Yeah, and so I argued with him like a lawyer for 6 months, and then finally I gave in and started taking Zoloft, and it was like a miracle. When I took it, it was literally as if somebody had taken a volume dial and turned it to 0, and that voice that would sound off in my head on a loop that triggered all the body sensations. And we're going to talk a lot about this tomorrow, like the difference between worry and how that triggers anxiety, and then the difference between anxiety and panic, and then how you can utilize the tools that I'm talking about to curb the worrying, to control the anxiety, to stabilize the panic, and really self-monitor. And see, I think that is the single greatest skill that anybody could have, the ability to self-monitor. You could call it mindset, you could call it self-awareness, but truly to be so in tune with yourself that in a nanosecond, you pick up when things are going south with your thoughts, that you understand how to monitor yourself, your behavior, what you're thinking, so that you align with your values and your choices.
Throughout the years in business, I found something, which was I'd always ask why you do things. And the answers you invariably get are, oh, that's just the way it's done. Nobody knows why they do what they do. Nobody thinks about things very deeply in business. That's what I found. I'll give you an example. When we were building our Apple I's in the garage, we knew exactly what they cost. When we got into a factory in the Apple II days, the accounting had this notion of a standard cost, where you'd kind of set a standard cost, and then at the end of a quarter, you'd adjust it with a variance. And I kept asking, well, why do we do this? And the answer was, well, that's just the way it's done. And after about 6 months of digging into this, what I realized was the reason you do it is because you don't really have good enough controls to know how much it costs. So you guess, and then you fix your guess at the end of the quarter. And the reason you don't know how much it costs is because your information systems aren't good enough. So, but nobody said it that way. And
And so later on, when we designed this automated factory for Macintosh, we were able to get rid of a lot of these antiquated concepts and know exactly what something cost to the second. So in business, a lot of things are, I call it folklore. They're done because they were done yesterday and the day before. And so what that means is if you're willing to sort of ask a lot of questions and think about things and work really hard, you can learn business pretty fast. It's not the hardest thing in the world.
It's not rocket science.
It's not rocket science.
Successful people are not people without problems. They're simply people who've learned to solve their problems. And there you have it. Living successfully, getting the things we want from life is a matter of solving the problems which stand between where we now are and the point we wish to reach. No one is without problems. They're a part of living. But let me show you how much time we waste in worrying about the wrong problems. Here's a reliable estimate of the things people worry about. Things that never happen, 40%. Things over and past that can't be changed by all the worry in the world, 30%. Needless worries about our health, 12%. Petty miscellaneous worries, 10%. Real, legitimate worries, 8%. In short, 92% of the average person's worries take up valuable time, cause painful stress, even mental anguish, and are absolutely unnecessary. And of the real, legitimate worries, there are two kinds. There are the problems we can solve, and there are the problems beyond our ability to personally solve. But most of our real problems usually fall into the first group, the ones we can solve if we learn how.
What is it that you have that so many people who are unbelievably brilliant at engineering or are incredibly good managers or bold business people or what have you, what is it that you have, do you think, that enables you to make this stuff happen?
Well, first of all, I certainly don't think I can, do anything or do most things that people think are impossible. Because I think a lot of what people think is impossible is actually impossible. But occasionally it's not. I guess it's. I think I've said this before. I think it's helpful to have kind of a physics framework for looking at things. Do a first principles analysis, look for negative feedback, and really believe in what you're doing, but not just from a blind faith standpoint. Like to have really thought about it and say, okay, this is true. I'm convinced it's true, and I've tried every angle to figure out if it's untrue. And sort negative feedback to figure out maybe if I'm maybe wrong, but then after all that, it still seems like this is the right way to go. Then that I think gives one a fundamental conviction and an ability to convey that conviction to others and to convince them to join. And that's what a company is. It's a group of people who come together to create a product of some kind. And so if you can convey that and answer the concerns that people have, convince them that this is something that needs to be done, it's important, and here is a path to do it, even if that path has a lot of danger associated with it and risk, and maybe it won't succeed. But people can understand, okay, this is why it's important, and even if the odds are that it won't succeed, it's worth trying to do it. Then I think you can create a great company.
The only thing you have to believe in right now is that humans are capable of learning. That humans, for whatever reason, nature has chosen to not endow us with a whole bunch of pre-programmed things. So for instance, a baby horse, a foal, I believe is how you say that. When they're born, they can already walk. Literally, boom, they come out and they're walking and all is well, because that's all hardwired into them. But a horse is a horse is a horse, and they're gonna stay a horse, and that's that. And you're never gonna find a horse reading Chaucer, just not gonna happen. So that's, all those decisions are pre-wired. Humans, on the other hand, come out, they cannot take care of themselves. They're a lump of flesh. They basically know how to suckle, and that's sort of the extent of it. But now humans have the ability to go in all these crazy different directions, and they can learn to become an astrophysicist, they can learn to become a carpenter, a doctor, an astronaut. Like, the number of directions that humans can go in is crazy. The amount of what was once known as junk DNA, we now know as epigenetic signaling. The way that we can respond in all these different directions to our environment, to the things that we choose to focus our energies on is truly unique to humans, is just absolutely astonishing. So understanding that that's baked into the human animal is the ability to learn and go in any direction. So once you realize that humans are adaptation machines, that we can learn anything, now it's like, okay, whatever you want to do, you can do it as long as you're willing to pay that price. I'm not saying that it's not going to be hard. It is going to be very, very hard. I'm just saying that it is doable and that you will receive a return on investment in your energies. And that's what people need to know and believe to the core of their being, that my time in this direction will be rewarded. Now, here's where people themselves up. There is this retarded debate about whether or not it is, hey, am I pre-programmed? I'm good at math, and so that's it, and I should go do things that are math, or I'm good at verbal, and I should go do things that are verbal. I'm naturally gifted as an athlete, so I should go be an athlete. Look, I'm not saying people don't get early wins. People get early wins. And if you happen to love the thing that you're getting early wins, and that's awesome, man, and you will find it just a little bit easier. You've got a headwind or a tailwind, I guess, a tailwind. You have a tailwind. And so that, yeah, love that. But if the thing that gives you the most energy in life is something that you have no natural inclinations for, then go learn that. When I say that I have zero natural ability as an entrepreneur, I mean zero. I had to learn everything from not being lazy, to problem solving, to overcoming my paralyzing fear, to look at world like a puzzle, dealing with anxiety. Literally, it was comical as I was going down my journey in the beginning as an entrepreneur to figure this shit out. It's ridiculous. And then I meet people who are like ripping flowers out of people's front yards and selling them back to them. Like, when I say that was not me, I had a paper route and I was so chicken to go up to people's doors that I actually only got half the money that I could have gotten for the same paper route, the same amount of effort. But because I was so afraid to go knock on people's doors and ask to collect the money that was due, that for like 2 years, I did a paper route for half the money. Okay, that's how spastic of an entrepreneur I was when I started. So you can learn this stuff. Now, my goals demanded that I learn entrepreneurship, so I learned it. So that's what I want people to understand. What is your goal? Work backwards from there. If it lines up with what you're naturally good at, that's amazing and congratulations. But there are going to be times where it doesn't line up, and you've just got to either change your goal or recognize that I'm going to have to figure these things out.
Find a situation where you can be in the room with masters of a craft. And that could just be deal making. It could be joining a small company, say fewer than 50 people, where you simply get to observe one of the principles, negotiating, in an industry that you don't even care anything about, right? It could be waste management and you want to go into high tech, but if you sit in a room with someone who's an absolute pro at crafting deals, negotiating, getting past no, those skills and maybe those relationships start to snowball, all right? And this is what Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, would call systems thinking. So instead of being wedded to the outcome of a given job, you are accumulating skills and relationships that transcend that job, okay? And if you choose your environments well, because as I've said before, and as people like Drew, the CEO of Dropbox, who's a friend, have said, you're the average of the 5 people you associate with most, right? So if you take just a few years, have the patience, a few years to really develop core competencies that allow you to craft your own reality and life, negotiation, deal making, getting past no, etc., learning how to pitch, how to get someone's attention in 30 seconds so that you can then create the desire and ultimately ask for some type of action. Once you develop those, then you can really just create the map for the next decade and the next several decades. So that would be it. It would be learn before you earn. And it's never too late to do that. So I don't care if you're coming out of college, coming out of high school, 30, 40, whatever it is. Systems thinking, focus on the skills and relationships first, and then you can just create a blank check for how much money you want to make.
How many times have you had somebody say to you, hey, have you got a minute, Bob? Have you got a minute? They don't want a minute. I want you to think about that. I read a poem one time. It said, I have only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it. It was forced upon me. I can't refuse it. I didn't seek it and I didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it, give account if I abuse it. It's only a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. Well, at any rate, I thought I'm going to put this on a video and I'm just going to share it with everybody. Just this one little part out of the seminar I'm making. I want you to look at this sand timer and I want you to think about your life. The sand in the top of the glass represents the future. The sand in the bottom of the glass represents the past. Now, do you know, we know what's in the past and yet we can't do anything about it. Do you know what the trick is? You don't know how much sand's in the top of the glass. You may think you have a lot, you might only have a little. Then again, you may think you have a little, and you might have a lot. When I was a little boy, I was raised by my grandmother. And I don't know, when I was a little gaffer, she was probably 60, but as long as I could remember, Grandma would say, I'll soon be gone, dear, I'll soon be gone. Well, you know, we loved her. She was really an angel of God, but we thought she was never going to go. She lived to be 94 for 30-some years. I'll soon be gone. She didn't think she had much time left. She had 34 years left. Now, about the same time, I had a buddy of mine, Bob Yates. He was just 16. And bang, he ran into the abutment of a bridge and his life was snuffed out. If you had asked him a half hour before how much sand he had left, he would have said at least a half a century. He didn't have a half an hour. See, the trick is we don't know how much sand we have left. The future, we don't know. The past, it's gone. Now, the only thing you can deal with is what's right here, right now. And if you look, the sand is always moving. Now, think of this. You see, I was working on that, and then I was working on a graph I've got here on my computer, and I'm thinking of the time somebody said, hey, have you got a minute? Well, they don't really want a minute. Do you know if you're earning $50,000 a year, a minute's 42 cents? A half hour is $12.50. If we take that ahead a bit, if you're earning $80,000 a year, a minute's 67 cents. Half hour is $20. If you're earning $150,000 a year, you got a minute? It costs you $1.25 a minute. A half hour is $37.50. So do you see, if somebody said, you want to stop for a cup of coffee? Well, if you're earning $250,000 a year, a minute is $2.08. Half hour is $62.50. And then, of course, you got the coffee to pay for on top of that. So you see, the point is this. This is all we've got right here, right now. We don't know how much we have left in the future, but we do know what we've got now. And I have found the people that win are the people who make up their mind. They're not going to waste the minutes. They're going to be productive. They're going to make it happen every minute.
The only thing that I see that is distinctly different about me is I'm not afraid to die on a treadmill, right? I will run.
You would not be outworked.
I will not be outworked.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
You know, you might have more talent than me. You might be smarter than me. You might be sexier than me. You might be all of those things. You got it on me in 9 categories. But if we get on the treadmill together, right, there's 2 things. You're getting off first, or I'm going to die. It's really that simple, right? So let's go back to the question about what if people block me out. It's going to be 2 options. I'm going to get back in, or I'm going to be dead. Right? It's like, you're not going to outwork me. It's such a simple, basic concept. It's the guy who is willing to hustle the most is going to be the guy that just gets that loose ball. You know, he got the O. Okay, he got 2. Ooh, God, he grabbed that one. That was going to be out of bounds, but he saved it back in. It's like the commodity that I see the majority of people who aren't getting the places they want or aren't achieving the things that they want in this business is strictly based on hustle. It's strictly based on being outworked. It's strictly based on missing crucial opportunities. I say all the time, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready.
I'm the kind of person that believes you should always make decisions with your heart and soul. You can use your brain for math. You can use your brain to look at the fine print in a contract. But when it comes to the actual feel of the decision, you always want to go inward and check it against your heart and soul. How do you do that? Here's the simple test. Does the decision that you're about to make expand you, expand your future, or expand the possibilities of your life? If the answer is yes, then the decision is yes, no matter how terrifying it is. If you conversely look at the choice that you have to make, and the decision will shrink you, will silence you, will inhibit you in some way, then the answer is no. No matter how easy the decision is, no matter how safe the decision is, the answer is no. Now, one of the things I want to point out that when you start to use this, does it expand or does it shrink me? Does it open possibilities or does it keep things closed? Does it raise my voice or does it silence me, right? Is that there's always a short-term and a long-term impact to the decision. The short-term impact to making an expansive decision, a decision that's based in your heart and your soul, sometimes it's terrifying because sometimes it means moving or it means changing a job or changing a relationship or having a difficult conversation or starting something new. And those sorts of things are always uncomfortable. So brace for impact, put the force fields up, but make the decision anyway. Because the long-term impact of making a decision from your heart and soul, that is where the best life comes from. Because you're living for what's true for you, not what's safe in the moment.
I'm not going to stare at it. You stare at your past and you'll end up staying there. It's okay to look back and admire it, but you carry on. I'm not in the business of staring back at it. You know what I mean? And getting lost back there. People say a loss can make or break a fighter, but trust me, a win can also make or break a fighter because they get comfortable with a win. People can get comfortable with a win, and slack off then. Slack off on the training. Slack off on the diet. They've won one. They're winners now. That's not me. You know, you sleep on a win and you'll wake up with a loss. So I just carry on, keep doing what I'm doing, and that's why this turnaround is so good for me. Vegas straight away. The Fighting Irish head to the fighting capital. It's perfect. Continue on this path, the freight train straight to the top.
You will fail at some point in your life. Accept it. You will lose. You will embarrass yourself. You will suck at something. There's no doubt about it. And I know that's probably not a traditional message for a graduation ceremony, but hey, I'm telling you, embrace it because it's inevitable. And I should know. In the acting business, you fail all the time. Early on in my career, I auditioned for a part in a Broadway musical. Perfect role for me, I thought, except for the fact that I can't sing. So I'm in the wings, I'm about to go on stage, but the guy in front of me, he's singing like Pavarotti. He's just, and he's just going on and on and on, and I'm just shrinking, I'm getting smaller and smaller. So they say, oh, thank you very much, and you'll be hearing from us. So I come out with my little music, and it was Just My Imagination by the Temptations. That's what I came up with. So I hand it to the accompanist, and she looks at it and looks at me and looks out at the director and was like, all right. So I start, you know, I'm gonna sing. I'm like, it's just my imagination once again, and then coming away with me. And I'm not saying anything, so I'm thinking I'm getting better. So I just start getting into it. It was just my imagination. running. They say, oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Washington, thank you. So I assumed I didn't get the job. But the next part of the audition, he called me back. The next part of the audition is the acting part of the audition. So I'm like, hey, okay, maybe I can't sing, but I know I can act. So they pair me with this guy, and again, I didn't know about musical theater. And musical theater is big, so they can reach everyone all the way in the back of the stadium. And I'm more from a realistic, naturalistic kind of acting where you actually talk to the person next to you. So I don't know what my line was. My line was, well, hand me the cup. And his line was, well, I will hand you the cup, my dear. The cup will be there to be handed to you. I said, oh, okay. Well, should I give you the cup back? Oh, yes, you should give it back to me because you know that is my cup and it should be given back to me. I didn't get the job. But here's the thing. I didn't quit. I didn't fall back. I walked out of there to prepare for the next audition, and the next audition, and the next audition. I prayed. I prayed, and I prayed. But I continued to fail, and fail, and fail. But it didn't matter, because you know what? There's an old saying, you hang around the barbershop long enough, sooner or later you're going to get a haircut. So you will catch a break, and I did catch a break. Last year, I did a play called Fences on Broadway. Someone talked about it. Won the Tony Award. And I didn't have to sing, by the way. But here's the kicker. It was at the Court Theater. It was at the same theater that I failed that first audition 30 years prior. The point is, and I'll pick up the pace, the point is every graduate here today has the training and the talent to succeed. But do you have the guts to fail?
Most people do a lot of talking and most people don't put in the effort. There's nothing you can accomplish in life with the right amount of work. The challenge is, are you willing to do the work? And the reality is most people aren't, but that's the opportunity, right? It's like people at school. Most people are lazy, right? They barely get through it, and so that creates opportunity.
The only way to deal with fear that I found in my life is a couple ways. One of those ways is to turn it on itself and ask yourself, what am I afraid of? If I'm afraid of that, I gotta be more afraid of what I'm gonna miss out on, missing out on my mission, missing out on who I'm supposed to be. In other words, if you're not getting rid of fear, then use fear. Use fear or it uses you, it's that simple. So you gotta say, okay, what's the price if I just stay doing this? What's the price? I need to really get scared if I learn all this and I don't follow through. That's something to be scared about. And then that fear will get you over your fear. It'll push you through. Turn fear on itself. Second way you can do it is use what you've probably heard me say, because I've used it since I was 17, is my little rocking chair test, right? I'm gonna sit myself in my rocking chair, and I'm 85 years old, I'm looking back on my life, and I say, I didn't do this, or I did.
When I was about 15 years old, my first real job, and on the second day, I was asked to scrape the gum off between the Mexican tiles on the floor, and I said to the woman who owned the store, it was called Magoo's Ice Cream Parlor, you didn't hire me to scrape gum, you hired me to scoop ice cream. And there's this girl in the shoe store across the way that's looking at me, I don't want her to see her scraping the gum. And she said, what are you talking about? I own this store, I'll do anything I want with you, get down on your knees and scrape that gum. And I said, I'm not doing it. She said, you're fired. Last job I ever had. I owe that woman everything. I don't like to work for people. Many of you in here, I hope, inherit that. There's nothing wrong with it, but if you want to control your own destiny, you work for yourself. That's how it works. I'm trying to inspire those of you who are on the tipping point. Take the chance, you're young. Go for it. There's nothing better than being able to wake up in the morning 10 years or 20 years from now and do whatever you like. It's about freedom. That's what matters. I'm not saying being an employee is bad, but believe me, being an entrepreneur is better. I'm a little biased.
When I was 8 years old, I was delivering papers door to door, knocking on doors, expanding a paper route. When I was 12 years old, I was shoveling driveways after snowstorms in New York.
Yep.
Make 20 bucks a driveway after a big snowstorm. I hit it big for the first time when I was 16, selling ices on the beach, blanket to blanket to blanket.
Wow.
And that's how it started. And after that, I was hiring people to come work. I had 12-year-old kids selling puka shell necklaces for me. My mother was buttering bagels in the morning, and that was really the way I always was moving towards life.
We have so many rules in life about everything. I say break the rules, not the law, but break the rules. My wife has a t-shirt. That says, well-behaved women rarely make history. Well, I don't want to burst her bubble, but the same is true with men. It is impossible to be a maverick or a true original if you're too well-behaved and don't want to break the rules. You have to think outside the box. That's what I believe. After all, what is the point of being on this earth if all you want to do is be liked by everyone and avoid trouble? The only way that I ever got any place was by breaking some of the rules. After all, I remember that after I was finished with my bodybuilding career, I wanted to get into acting and I wanted to be a star in films. You can imagine what the agents said when I went to meet all those agents. Everyone had the same line that it can't be done. The rules are different here. It says, look at your body. You have this huge, monstrous body, overly developed, that doesn't fit into the movies. You don't understand. This was 20 years ago, the Hercules movies. Now there's the little guys that are in. Dustin Hoffman, Woody Allen, Jack Nicholson, before he gained weight, of course, that is. But anyway, those are the guys that were in. And the agent also complained about my accent. He says, no one ever became a star with an accent like that, especially not with a German accent. And yes, I can imagine with your name, Arnold Schwarzenschnitzel or whatever the name is, on a billboard. Yeah, that's going to draw a lot of tickets and sell a lot of tickets. Yeah, right. So this is the kind of negative attitude they had, but I didn't listen to those rules. Even though they were very nice and they said, look, we can get you some bit parts. We can get you to be, playing a wrestler or a bouncer. Oh, maybe with your German accent, we can get you to be a Nazi officer in Hogan's Heroes or something like that. But, I didn't listen to all this. These were their rules, not my rules. I was convinced I could do it, that if I worked as hard as I did in bodybuilding, 5 hours a day, and I started getting to work, I started taking acting classes, took English classes, took speech classes, dialogue classes, accent removal classes I even took. I remember running around, a fine wine grows on a vine. You see, because Germans had difficulties with the F and the W and the V. So fine wine grows on a vine. I know what some of you now say is, I hope that Arnold got his money back. But let me tell you something. I had a good time doing those things and it really helped me. And finally I broke through. And I started getting the first parts in TV, Streets of San Francisco. Lucille Ball hired me. I made Pumping Iron, Stay Hungry. And then I got the big break in Conan the Barbarian. And there the director said, if we wouldn't have Schwarzenegger, we would have to build one. Now think about that. And then when I did Terminator, I'll be back. Became one of the most famous lines in a movie history, all because of my crazy accent. Now think about it. The things that the agent said will be totally a detriment and will be impossible for me to get a job, all of a sudden became an asset for me. All of those things, my accent, my body and everything. So it just shows you never listen to that you can't do something. And you have to work your way up, of course, run for something else first. I mean, it was the same when I ran for governor. The same lines that you have to work your way up, it can't be done. And then, of course, I ran for governor, and the rest, of course, is history. They said you have to start with a small job as mayor, and then as assemblyman, and then as lieutenant governor, and then as governor. And they said, that's the way it works in a political career. I said, I'm not interested in a political career. I want to be a public servant. I want to fix California's problems and bring people together and bring the parties together. So, like I said, I decided to run. I didn't pay attention to the rules, and I made it, and the rest is history.
So a friend of mine and I, we went for a run in Central Park. The Roadrunners organization, on the weekends, they host races. And it's very common at the end of the race, they'll have a sponsor who will give away something, apples or bagels or something. And on this particular day, when we got to the end of the run, there were some free bagels. And they had picnic tables set up, and on one side was a group of volunteers. On the table were boxes of bagels, and on the other side was a long line of runners waiting to get their free bagel. So I said to my friend, let's get a bagel. And he looked at me and said, the line's too long. And I said, free bagel. And he said, I don't want to wait in line. And I was like, free bagel. And he says, nah, it's too long. And that's when I realized that there's two ways to see the world. Some people see the thing that they want, and some people see the thing that prevents them from getting the thing that they want. I could only see the bagels. He could only see the line. And so I walked up to the line. I leaned in between two people, put my hand in the box, and pulled out two bagels. And no one got mad at me. Because the rule is, you can go after whatever you want. You just cannot deny anyone else to go after whatever they want. Now, I had to sacrifice choice. I didn't get to choose which bagel I got. I got whatever I pulled out, but I didn't have to wait in line. So the point is you don't have to wait in line. You don't have to do it the way everybody else has done it. You can do it your way. You can break the rules. You just can't get in the way of somebody else getting what they want.
Nothing works the first time. When you try something new, it probably won't work. When you try something new several times, it probably won't work. And the turning point in my life came when I would hear good ideas, and I was so eager to be successful in selling. I would run out and try the ideas, and they wouldn't work. I'd try a way of getting an appointment or answering an objection or closing a sale. It wouldn't work. And my natural response, and I think just to be disappointed. And then I realized nothing works, at least the first few times. So I decided I would try a new idea 5 or 10 times before I passed judgment on it. I would not just try it once and quit like most people do, and that changed my whole life. It was a turning point in my life because I realized from then on, if you've got a good idea and you've got a good goal and you want to double your income and improve the quality of your life and you have to try new things in order to get new results, it's not going to work the first time. So say, well, that didn't work. Try something else and try something else and try something else. Now, if you try, only two things can happen. What are they? Succeed or fail. If you succeed, you do more of it. If you fail, you learn from it, get smarter, and try it again. So you cannot lose by taking action. You can only lose